He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty. Lao Tzu. Greetings. We are beginning the cycle, Mechanics of Self-Control. Before we move to the first situation, it is important to clarify one fundamental truth. True strength does not lie in the absence of feelings or in an attempt to turn oneself into a soulless mechanism. Feelings are biochemical data, signals that your system sends to you in response to external stimuli. To be the master of your reactions means learning to insert a cognitive gap between stimulus and response. In this gap, freedom is born. We will consider human behavior as a chess game, where your most dangerous opponent is not the person opposite you, but your own evolutionary algorithms thirsting for impulsivity. Our goal is not suppression, but management. We will analyze 7 modules that will turn your mind into a reliable bastion of analytics and tranquility. Let us begin. If you recognized your own reactions or past behavioral patterns in these examples, please leave a plus in the comments. This does not indicate weakness. On the contrary, it is a signal that the process of changing your mindset has begun. Module 1. Observer distancing. Stage. The scenario. The observation. A spacious office with glass walls on the 40th floor. Julian is sitting in a chair. His palms rest calmly on his knees. Opposite him is Marcus, whose face has acquired a crimson hue. Marcus has just thrown a folder onto the table, which slid across the polished wood with a dull sound. "This is a mockery, Julian!" Marcus's voice vibrates at high frequencies, an attempt at dominance through acoustic aggression. "Your department missed the deadlines by 2 weeks. Do you understand what this means for the board of directors?" Julian notes how his own pulse accelerates by 5 beats per minute, activation of the sympathetic nervous system. He notices a slight tension in his masseter muscles. Instead of answering immediately, he pauses for 3 seconds. "I hear your concern regarding the deadlines, Marcus," Julian says in a steady, low voice, utilizing a calming frequency to reduce the intensity of the conflict. "Let us analyze the figures that led to this delay." Marcus leans forward, his pupils constricted, the focus of rage. "Figures? I do not need figures. I need results. You are simply trying to shed responsibility. Manipulation through shame and fear." Julian does not look away. He watches as a drop of sweat rolls down Marcus's temple. Inside Julian, a wave of irritation rises, but he views it as an object. Quote 10, quote 11, Julian replies calmly. Quote _12. Marcus freezes. The absence of the expected resistance from Julian deprives him of the quote _13 for escalation. 2. Stage. Quote _14, system analysis. In this scene, we observe a classic collision of quote _15, and quote _16. Marco acts within a reactive model. His brain perceives the project delay as a threat to social status, which triggers a release of cortisol and adrenaline. His goal is to provoke Julian into an identical emotional outburst to move a professional problem into the plane of personal struggle. Julian applies the technique of cognitive distancing. Instead of merging with his anger, quote _17 he turns it into an object of observation, quote _18 This activates the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which literally quote 19 the excessive activity of the amygdala. His calm tone and low-pitch act as a biological anchor. The human brain is prone to mirroring states. By maintaining steadfastness, Julian forces Marcus's nervous system to begin the process of involuntary synchronization with his tranquility. 3. Stage. Scientific validation. The scientific validation. In this situation, the results of the famous marshmallow test, conducted by Walter Mischel at Stanford University in the late 60s and early 70s, are clearly manifested. The essence of the experiment was that a child was offered one treat immediately, or two if they could wait 15 minutes. Decades of observation showed that those children who were able to cope with the impulse and wait for the second portion had significantly higher indicators of success, emotional intelligence, and stress resistance in adult life. Julian is currently passing his adult marshmallow test. His treat would be immediate relief through a retaliatory shout or excuses. However, he chooses a delayed benefit, maintaining a leadership position and a constructive solution to the problem. The ability to suppress a primary impulse for the sake of a long-term strategy is the foundation of cognitive flexibility. 4. Stage. Strategic protocol. The master key. To win the battle with yourself, it is necessary to implement the following algorithm. Control principle number 1. The 5-second rule and depersonalization. When you encounter direct aggression or an internal urge to perform an impulsive action, 1. Pause for 5 seconds. This time is necessary for your brain to transfer control from the limbic system to the prefrontal cortex. 2. Describe your state in the third person. Instead of, "I am scared," tell yourself, "The organism records fear." This turns you from a victim of biochemistry into a researcher. 3. Search for microsignals. Observe the physical manifestations of the opponent, blinking, shoulder tension. This shifts your focus from emotions to analytics. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. A sunbeam slowly moves across the gray carpet of the office, illuminating millions of dust particles dancing in absolute order. Silence settles in the room, in which only the steady ticking of the wall clock is heard. The air feels cool and transparent. The conflict is exhausted not because the parties reached an agreement, but because one of them refused to be chaos. Module 2. Filtering social projections. 1. Stage. The scenario. The observation. Dinner in a country house. Eleanor is sitting at a massive oak table. Caleb is opposite her. The light from 3 pendant lamps falls evenly, emphasizing the perfect symmetry of the table setting. Caleb holds a glass of wine. His fingers squeeze the thin stem slightly harder than necessary, a sign of suppressed frustration. "You have chosen this path again, Eleanor," Caleb says, his voice sounding with a hint of condescending bitterness, an attempt to evoke guilt to restore control. "Do you not think that your selfishness is starting to destroy what we have been building for 5 years? Eleanor notices how the corner of her left eye twitches almost imperceptibly, an involuntary microspasm in response to a verbal trigger. She takes a sip of water, concentrating on the sensation of coolness in her throat. An analytical summary surfaces in her mind. The object is using projection. His fear of losing stability is masked as a moral accusation. Probability of manipulation, 95%. "I hear that you call my decision selfishness," Eleanor says calmly, looking Caleb directly at the bridge of his nose, a technique that excludes emotional dominance of the gaze. "Let us clarify. Are you talking about my actions or about your discomfort resulting from these actions?" Caleb freezes for 2 seconds. His eyebrows draw together toward the center, anger, but then he shifts his gaze to the right, searching for argumentation or a false excuse. "It is one and the same," he exclaims, increasing the volume by 10 decibels. "You simply do not think about the consequences for us," utilizing the generalization "us" to blur the boundaries of personal responsibility. Eleanor's internal monologue remains cold. His pulse is now about 90 beats per minute. He is trying to impose his worldview on me, where I am the aggressor. If I justify myself, I lose. If I remain silent, I accept his projection. The third option, to remain a mirror. The consequences have been calculated 3 steps ahead, she replies, maintaining a soft but firm intonation. However, I cannot take responsibility for the feelings you choose to experience in this situation. 2. Stage. Psychological scan. System analysis. In this interaction, the key mechanism is projective identification. Caleb, unable to handle his anxiety regarding changes, tries to place this unpleasant feeling inside Eleanor, making her feel guilty. Eleanor uses cognitive reappraisal. She does not perceive Caleb's words as truth about herself, but classifies them as, quote, 42 or, quote, 43. This allows her to avoid the activation of mirror neurons, which in an ordinary state would force her to experience the same anger or the same anxiety as he does. Her ability to maintain the autonomy of the prefrontal cortex under emotional pressure from a close person is the highest form of cognitive flexibility. She does not, quote, 44 him. She does not allow his emotional state to infect her system. She preserves the boundaries of her, quote, 45 in conditions of social fusion. 3. Stage. Quote, 46, the scientific validation. To understand how social pressure and the expectations of others affect our perception of reality, it is worth turning to Solomon Asch's experiments on conformity conducted in the 1950s. In these studies, a participant was asked to compare the lengths of lines on cards. All other participants were Confederate actors and deliberately gave incorrect answers. The results showed that 75% of the participants agreed with the obviously false opinion of the majority at least once, simply to avoid standing out or entering into conflict. In the context of our story, Caleb acts as this majority, or significant social environment, that imposes a false assessment of her personality on Eleanor. Asch's experiment proves that the brain physically experiences discomfort when it goes against the opinion of a group or a close person. However, self-control lies in the ability to recognize this discomfort as a biological error and adhere to the objective facts of one's reality. 4. Stage. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 48, underscore, underscore, the master key. To maintain personal sovereignty in interpersonal clashes, apply the following algorithm. Control principle number 2, emotional sanitation. 1. Entrance labeling. As soon as you hear an accusation or an assessment directed at you, mentally place a tag. Quote, underscore 49. Quote, do not let this statement enter the category of facts. 2. Return of responsibility. Use descriptor phrases. Quote, underscore 50. Quote, this deprives the manipulator of the opportunity to impose a shared reality on you. 3. Prohibition on justifications. Remember that as soon as you begin to justify yourself, your nervous system switches to a mode of submission. Provide facts, not apologies. If the facts are not accepted, terminate the communication. 5. Stage. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 5. 1 underscore, underscore. On the table stands a glass of clear water. On its surface, there is not a single ripple, despite the fact that a tense conversation continues in the room. Eleanor looks at the transparent liquid, feeling the same transparency within herself. She is not what they say about her. She is the one who observes the process. The room smells of ozone and dry wood. Order is restored inside, which means external chaos no longer matters. Module 3. Architecture of Fear and Cognitive Capture. 1. Stage. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 52, underscore, underscore, the observation. The situation center of a large technology company. The walls are lined with matte panels that absorb sound. On a giant screen, red graphs pulse, a critical system failure threatening the loss of data for 5 million users. Marcus stands at the terminal. His breathing is rapid and shallow, hyperventilation caused by panic. He chaotically switches tabs. His fingers leave wet marks on the keyboard. Caleb stands 2 steps behind, folding his arms behind his back. He observes the pulsation of a vein on Marcus's neck. "We are losing everything, Caleb. In 10 minutes, the security protocols will reset," Marcus cries out, turning around. His eyes are dilated, the whites clearly visible, a typical mask of terror. Caleb takes a slow breath for 4 counts and an equally slow exhale for 6 counts. He feels his own amygdala sending the fight-or-flight signal, but he blocks it with a conscious effort. "Marcus, remove your hands from the console for 3 seconds," Caleb says in a low, monotonous voice, a command aimed at interrupting a destructive motor pattern. "You do not understand. If we do not enter the code now," an attempt to rationalize a panic-driven action. "Your pupils are dilated. You do not see the syntax error in the 4th line." Caleb takes a step forward, maintaining distance. "Step away. I will enter the data." Marcus freezes. The power of Caleb's tranquility acts as an external stabilizer. Caleb sits in the chair. His movements are economical and precise. He does not fight fear. He uses its energy to concentrate on the cursor. 2. Stage. Psychological scan. System analysis. In this situation, we see a phenomenon known as amygdala hijack. For Marcus, fear has completely blocked access to the logical resources of the prefrontal cortex. His brain has switched to the low road of information processing. The stimulus, crisis, immediately causes a reaction, panic, without the analysis stage. Caleb uses the method of physiological hacking. Through breath control, prolonged exhalation, he stimulates the vagus nerve, which sends a signal to the brain that there is no physical threat to life. This allows him to maintain cognitive flexibility. His analysis of Marcus's state __quote_63__ is another tool. By naming physiological symptoms out loud, he shifts the opponent's attention from the realm of emotions to the realm of biological facts, which helps Marcus at least partially regain control over himself. 3. Stage __quote _64 the scientific validation. To confirm the effectiveness of observing emotions, let us turn to Paul Ekman's research in the field of microexpressions. Ekman proved that basic emotions, such as fear, have universal physiological manifestations that last less than half a second. In an experiment where subjects were shown footage that caused strong stress, it was discovered those who were instructed to simply quote 65 demonstrated a much lower level of cortisol activation than those who tried to quote 66 fear or simply reacted to it. Observation turns you from a participant into an arbiter. This is precisely what Caleb does. He reads Marcus's microexpressions and his own internal impulses like data on a monitor, which deprives fear of its paralyzing power. 4. Stage __quote _67 the master key. To manage yourself in moments of acute crisis, use the following algorithm. Control principle number 3. Analytical deconstruction of fear. 1 symptom isolation. As soon as you feel panic, give it a name. __quote _68 __ do not say. __quote _69 __ say __quote _70 _2. The _quote _71 rule. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6. This is a biological switch for the stress reaction. 3. Search for a single detail. Focus on one physical object in the space and describe its characteristics. This will return your mind from an imagined future, catastrophe, to the real present. 5. Stage __quote quote, underscore 72, underscore underscore. Silence reigns in the control center. The hum of the servers turns into a steady, meditative background. The red graphs on the screen are replaced by a calm green color. Caleb sits motionless. His gaze is directed at one point. In his consciousness, there is no triumph, only a clear understanding that order is always the result of a victory over internal chaos. The air in the room feels fresh, as if after a thunderstorm. Quote, 73, Friedrich Nietzsche. Module 4, Sovereignty and Hierarchy 1. Stage, quote 74, The Observation. The boardroom of the Board of Directors. A long table of polished anthracite reflects the cold light of the ceiling panels. At the head of the table sits Marcus. His posture is emphasized as expansive. Elbows are spread wide. Palms occupy maximum space, a demonstration of territorial superiority. Julian sits to the right. His spine forms a straight line, but without tension. He does not lean back against the chair, maintaining an active but neutral position. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 75, underscore, underscore. Marcus makes a long pause, staring intently into Julian's eyes, an attempt to cause social discomfort through a quote 76. Quote 77, a direct threat to status and security. Julian feels a slight warmth arise in the area of the solar plexus, a quote 78 reaction in the face of an alpha individual. His internal observer immediately records, quote 79. Julian does not look away, but he does not make his eyes aggressive either. He slightly tilts his head 1 degree to the right, a signal of readiness to listen, devoid of submissiveness. Julian says, intentionally lowering his pitch, neutralizing aggression through a calm statement of facts. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 81, underscore, underscore. Marcus subtly compresses his lips, turning them into a thin line, a sign of restrained irritation from the inability to suppress the opponent emotionally. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 82, underscore, underscore. Marcus throws out, but his palm moves closer to his own torso, a reduction of the controlled territory. 2. Stage, underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 83, underscore, underscore. System analysis. In this scene, a classic algorithm of vertical social pressure is played out. Marcus uses underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 84, underscore, underscore to provoke Julian into reactive submissiveness. When a person encounters authority, their brain automatically begins to produce an increased amount of cortisol, which suppresses creative thinking and forces one to choose a strategy of underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 85. Underscore, underscore. Julian applies status neutrality. He separates Marcus's personality from his functional role. His brain conducts a deconstruction of the threat. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 86, underscore, underscore. Using the technique of underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 87, underscore, underscore. Julian transfers the conversation from an emotional hierarchical plane, underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 88, underscore, underscore, to the plane of an objective task, underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 89, underscore, underscore. This allows him to maintain a high level of dopamine, responsible for goal setting, and not fall into the cortisol pit of submission. 3. Stage, underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 90, underscore, underscore, the scientific validation. The phenomenon of blind obedience to authority was studied in detail in 1961 during Stanley Milgram's experiment at Yale University. The essence of the study was that the participant, teacher, had to punish another participant, learner, with electric shocks for mistakes. Despite the cries of pain, which were imitation, 65% of the participants reached the maximum voltage of 450 volts only because a person in a white coat, authority, said, "The experiment requires that you continue." This experiment proved that the human psyche has a deep obedience firmware that switches off one's own morality and logic in the face of hierarchy. Julian, in our scene, does what 2/3 of Milgram's participants could not do. He perceives the pressure of authority as an external factor and refuses to delegate the management of his reaction to the man in the white coat or in an expensive suit. 4. Stage. Strategic protocol, the master key. To maintain intellectual sovereignty under the pressure of hierarchy, use the following algorithm. Control principle number 4. Deconstruction of authority. 1. Visualization of functionality. Imagine the opponent not as a boss or a leader, but as a set of functions. He is the decision-maker, not the ruler of destinies. This reduces the degree of sacred awe. 2. The anchor fact technique. Always have 3 indisputable facts or figures before your eyes or in your mind. At the moment of an attack on your personality, return the conversation to these anchors. Facts have no hierarchy. They are objective. 3. Control of microposture. Do not make yourself smaller. Do not cross your legs under the chair. Occupy your space. Your body should send a signal to your brain. We are safe. We are equals. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. Julian looks out the panoramic window. On the horizon, the steel towers of the city are frozen in silence. In the office, only the barely perceptible hum of the air conditioning system is heard, creating a sense of sterility and order. On the black table stands a single cup of espresso, from which a thin stream of steam rises, perfectly vertical in the still air. Marcus's emotional storm has not left a single trace on this surface. Purity of thought is restored. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 105, underscore, underscore, Eleanor Roosevelt. Module 5. Architecture of Social Independence 1. Stage. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 106, underscore, underscore, the observation. An art gallery. The space is filled with the muffled hum of voices and the ringing of thin crystal. Eleanor stands before a large-scale canvas. In her hands is a glass of mineral water. Caleb approaches her accompanied by 2 influential critics. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 107, underscore, underscore, Caleb says. His smile appearing flawless, but the corners of his lips are tense, a signal of social masking. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 108, underscore, underscore, utilizing the underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 109, underscore, underscore to create pressure and evoke a need for justification. Eleanor records how an immediate desire to explain her motives, an impulse to seek approval, surfaces in her consciousness. She feels a slight tingling in her palms, a rush of blood characteristic of social anxiety. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 110, underscore, underscore, she notes to herself. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 111, underscore, underscore. She pauses for 4 seconds, allowing the silence between them to become dense. She does not smile back, maintaining her face in a state of underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 112, underscore, 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 quote, underscore 113, underscore, underscore, Eleanor says. Her voice sounds clear, without questioning intonations at the end of phrases. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 114, underscore, underscore. Shifting the focus from justification to an analysis of the opponent's state. Caleb takes a quick breath, a disruption of respiratory rhythm, and glances at the critics. His attempt to cause Eleanor to feel self-doubt broke against her refusal to enter the role of the underscore, underscore. quote, underscore 115, underscore 2. Stage, underscore quote, underscore 116, underscore system analysis. In this module, we consider the work of the social reward system. The human brain is evolutionarily programmed to avoid rejection by the group, because in primitive times, expulsion meant death. Social disapproval activates the same zones of the brain, the dorsal part of the anterior cingulate cortex, as physical pain. Eleanor demonstrates cognitive autonomy. She realized that Caleb's criticism is not an objective fact, but a tool for changing her behavior and reducing her social weight. Instead of yielding to the oxytocin trap, the desire to restore connection through agreement or justification, she uses the differentiation of self, others. Her brain blocks an attempt by an external control system to impose guilt on her. She understands. Her value is not a derivative of the opinion of Marcus or Caleb. This allows her to maintain a low level of cortisol and a high speed of information processing. 3. Stage, scientific validation. The scientific validation. To understand the depth of social pain, it is worth considering the cyberball experiment developed by Professor Kipling Williams. During this computer study, the subject played ball with two other players, who were actually a computer program. At some point, the program stopped passing the ball to the subject, completely ignoring them. Functional MRI data showed that even in such a simple and artificial situation, the human brain reacts to exclusion from the game in the same way as to a real physical blow or burn. Eleanor in the gallery is subjected to a psychological analog of cyberball. Caleb is trying to exclude her from the circle of competent specialists. Her victory lies in the fact that she recognizes this pain as a biological atavism and refuses to change her strategy for the sake of having the ball thrown to her again. 4. Stage, strategic protocol, the master key. To free yourself from dependence on others' approval, implement the following rule in your practice. Control a principle. Number 5. Sovereignty of the internal evaluator. 1. Cut off, quote 128. When someone says, quote 129 or quote 130, mentally translate this into, quote 131-2, the quote 132. Technique. To any attempt to cause you shame or self-doubt, respond with a question about the feelings of the interlocutor. Quote 133. This returns the projection to the owner. 3. Acceptance of social death. Allow yourself to be, quote 134 or quote 135 in the eyes of another. As soon as you accept the possibility that you will not be approved, the person's power over you will vanish. 5. Stage, atmosphere of statics. The white walls of the gallery reflect a cold, clean light. Eleanor stands motionless, like one of the sculptures. In her glass, 3 air bubbles slowly rise, reaching the surface in absolute silence. The hum of the crowd seems distant, like the sound of the surf outside the windows of a bunker. Clarity reigns in her consciousness. She does not need confirmation of her existence from the outside. Order within is autonomous. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Seneca, Module 6, Alchemy of Aggression. 1. Stage, the scenario. The observation. A city park. Twilight. Julian and Marcus walk along a gravel path leading to the exit. Deceptive idyll reigns around them, disturbed only by the rhythmic crunch of stones under their soles. Marcus stops abruptly, blocking Julian's path. His face is distorted. His eyebrows are lowered and drawn together toward the bridge of his nose, and his upper eyelids are raised, a classic expression of rage. "You set me up at the council, Julian," Marcus almost hisses, closing the distance to 20 centimeters. "You looked like a saint while I was drowning. You are a calculating wretch, and I will not let you get away with this." a verbal attack aimed at provoking a physical or emotional response. Julian feels an immediate mobilization occurring in his body. The adrenal glands release a portion of adrenaline, and the vessels of the extremities constrict to redirect blood to large muscles, preparation for a fight. His internal gaze immediately scans this reaction. An attempt at external destabilization detected. The limbic system demands a response in the same modality. I am transferring control to cold analysis mode. He does not take a step back, which would be a sign of submissiveness, but he does not clench his fists either. His palms remain open and relaxed. Your perception of the situation as betrayal is a consequence of your stress, Marcus, Julian says. His voice sounds monotonous, like a metronome. You are currently in a state of high arousal. In such a mode, your brain is unable to process facts. We will continue when your cortisol level decreases. Analyzing the opponent's physiological state out loud. To hell with you and your psychoanalysis. Marcus makes a sharp movement with his hand, stopping at 10 centimeters from Julian's chest. Julian does not even blink. He records the micro-movement of Marcus's eyes, who is looking for fear in him, but find only a mirrored void. Your aggression is a cry for help from your overloaded system, Julian continues. I will wait 30 seconds. Breathe. Marcus freezes. His hand slowly lowers. The absence of resistance from Julian deprives his aggression of a vector. It simply dissipates in the cool evening air. 2. Stage. Psychological scan. System analysis. In this interaction, we see the work of prefrontal inhibition. Aggression is the most energy-consuming and primitive way of reacting. At the moment of Marcus's attack, Julian's brain received a signal of threat. However, thanks to trained cognitive flexibility, Julian managed to impose a prohibition on the impulsive action. He used the technique of a biological mirror. By naming Marcus's state, ___, quote, _151, ___, quote, _152, he forced Marcus to involuntarily think about his biology. This action switches the aggressor's brain from action mode to reflection mode, which inevitably leads to a reduction in the intensity of emotions. Julian's internal monologue at this moment, quote, 1533, stage, quote, 154, the scientific validation. To confirm the mechanisms of aggression and the possibility of control over it, let us turn to Albert Bandura's experiments with the Bobo doll, conducted in 1961. The research showed that aggressive behavior is largely modeled by the social environment. When people see aggression, their mirror neurons push them to reproduce the same pattern. However, subsequent refinements in the field of neurobiology of the will proved the existence of the so-called free veto, Benjamin Libet's concept. Libet discovered that between the emergence of an unconscious impulse to act, for example the desire to hit back, and the action itself, there exists a gap of 200 milliseconds. Self-control is the ability to use these 200 milliseconds to impose a conscious veto on a primitive impulse. Julian demonstrated exactly this. He caught the impulse before it turned into a deed. 4. Stage. ___, quote, _156, the master key. To transform aggression, your own or someone else's, into controlled energy, use the following algorithm. Control. Principle number 6. The information vacuum technique. 1 refusal to counterattack. Remember that any retaliatory aggression is food for conflict. Deprive the opponent of this food. Become the void into which his blow falls. 2. Verbalization of biology. Out loud, name what is happening to the opponent. I see that you are currently at your limit. Your anger prevents you from seeing logic. This transfers the conflict from an emotional plane to a clinical one. 3. Using the 200 milliseconds pause. Train the delay before answering. Any pause longer than 2 seconds automatically returns control to the prefrontal cortex. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. The park plunges into darkness, and 2 lines of lanterns light up. Their light falls in even circles on the dark gravel. The air becomes damp and motionless. Marcus stands, breathing heavily, but his shoulders have dropped. Julian looks at the horizon, where the sky has acquired a deep indigo hue. In his internal world, there is neither resentment nor triumph, only flawless calculation and peace. The conflict dissolved, without leaving a single crack in the structure of his personality. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Module 7. Integration of the Master One. Stage. The scenario. The observation. The upper deck of a private yacht drifting in the open sea. The horizon merges with the water in a single gray line. Julian sits in a chair made of light rattan. Before him are Marcus and Eleanor. This is the final point of negotiations on the merger of companies, a process that lasted 9 months. Marcus places a document on the table that changes the terms of the deal in favor of his side by 15%. This is a direct act of treachery committed at a moment when all defenses were formally removed. "We have reassessed the risk, Julian," Marcus says, his voice sounding with a barely perceptible shade of triumph, an attempt to enjoy the moment of dominance. "Either you sign this now, or we exit the game, and your fund loses everything by morning." An ultimatum aimed at activating the basic fear of survival. Julian feels something unusual happening inside him. It is not anger, and it is not panic. It is a cold, pulsing silence. He records how his ego tries to surface to protect its territory, but he gently pushes it aside. Observing the concept of loss, Julian thinks. My brain evaluates the probability of collapse as high. Hormonal background is stable. I see how Marcus holds his breath. He is waiting for my reaction. He is a hostage of his expectation. I am not. 30% of the internal monologue. Analysis of probabilities and separating himself from the result. Julian slowly shifts his gaze to Eleanor. She observes him with professional curiosity. He takes a sip of cold tea, feeling the taste of every drop. An ultimatum is always a sign of weakness of position, Marcus, Julian says. His voice is devoid of emotions. It sounds like a statement of a physical law. You are suggesting that I choose between a loss of assets and a loss of control. I choose the third option. We return to the original conditions in 10 minutes, or this yacht turns back to the shore. My readiness to lose everything is higher than your desire to win this. Marcus swallows, an involuntary pharyngeal reflex signaling a sudden loss of confidence. His win-win move encountered a person who conquered his main fear, the fear of failure. 2. Stage, psychological scan. System analysis. In this final module, we see the achievement of a state of absolute self-control. Julian integrated all previous skills into a single system. He does not simply suppress the limbic response, he deconstructs it in real time. The mechanism of internal locus of control works here. While Marcus depends on an external result, the signing of the contract, Julian depends only on the purity of his processes. His prefrontal cortex is in a state of hyperfocus. He uses the neuroplasticity of his mind to switch to flow mode at the moment of peak tension. His strategy is based on game theory and an understanding of biology. He knows that an aggressor always counts on the predictability of the victim. By becoming unpredictably calm, he breaks the opponent's neural circuit, forcing the opponent to face his own anxiety. This is the high point of the mechanics of self-control, when your internal statics become a tool for changing external reality. 3. Stage. Scientific validation. The scientific validation. To finalize our cycle, let us turn to Julian Rotter's research on the locus of control. Conducted in 1966, Rotter divided people into those who possess an external locus, believe that their life depends on circumstances and other people, and those who possess an internal locus, convinced that they themselves are the cause of their successes and failures. Research over 60 years confirms people with an internal locus have a 40% higher resistance to depression, stress, and manipulation. Julian in our story demonstrates the ultimate internal locus. He does not give Marcus power over his state. He understands that even if he loses the fund, his self will remain intact. It is precisely this readiness to accept any outcome that makes him invincible. As neurobiological tests show, such people have an increased density of gray matter in zones responsible for emotional regulation and long-term planning. 4. Stage. Strategic protocol. The master key. To complete the transformation and transition to the master level, adopt the final setting. Control principle number 7. Absolute equilibrium through detachment. 1. Disidentification with the result. Your task is not to win, but to maintain clarity. If you have maintained clarity, you have already won, whatever the outcome may be. 2. The death of the ego technique. In a critical moment, ask yourself, what would I do if I absolutely did not care about the opinion of others and about maintaining my current status? The answer to this question is the strongest strategy. 3. Constancy of observation. Do not turn off the scientist mode even in moments of peace. Analyze your small irritations, boredom, and joy. Self-control is not armor that is put on before a battle. It is the skin in which you live. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. The yacht rhythmically sways on the waves. Around it is the boundless sea, which has neither beginning nor end. Embodying the idea of the infinite order of nature. Documents lie on the table. Their edges flutter slightly in the wind, but they themselves are motionless. Julian looks at his hands. They are relaxed. There are no extra thoughts in his head. Only silence, only clarity, only victory over the last enemy, himself. The cycle is complete. The mechanics work perfectly. The cycle of 7 modules is complete. We have passed the path from the primary impulse to the absolute sovereignty of the personality. You saw how Julian, Eleanor, and others transformed the chaos of external pressure into an ordered structure of analysis. Now these tools belong to you. Remember, self-control is not cold armor hiding weakness, but the living architecture of your mind. Now that you have learned to insert a cognitive gap of 5 seconds between stimulus and reaction, you have gained a freedom inaccessible to the majority. In a world that constantly tries to throw you off balance, your tranquility is the most effective strategy of dominance. 7 steps have turned a reactive person into an aware leader. The battle is won. Order is established. He who understands the mechanisms of the psyche gains real freedom. Subscribe to analyze the hidden laws of human behavior together. And be sure to write in the comments which strategy we should analyze in the next issue.